Morris, thank you for inviting me. Thank you all for your wonderful hospitality. This morning I want to say two things that may seem contradictory, but I don't think they are. The first is I want to name that the Episcopal Church swims in a sea of addiction. The second thing is, paradoxically, I want to assert that those of us who are addicts in recovery have a gift to give to the church that the church desperately needs. So it's sort of hard news first, hopeful news second. At our last General Convention, as you heard yesterday, we had resolutions for our church to, quote, confront and repent the Episcopal Church's complicity in a culture of alcohol, denial, and enabling. Now, I'm not the Grinch that's come here to steal the fun out of Mardi Gras, or to say, don't go tailgate with the saints next week. I'm here to remind us of our mission, to restore all people to unity with God and one another in Christ. The unity that we seek is deeper than any kind of camaraderie that comes from having a few drinks together. And God knows it's deeper than any sense of union around a denial that we have an addiction in many forms, and that addiction is eating away the culture of our country and the culture of our church. Alan Jones once said that you are the veil that separates you from the paradise you seek. Our addictions are that veil. They separate us from heaven here and then, because our addictions make us smaller, and they are walls that keep us from one another. They keep us from communion. I stopped drinking when I was 40. I come from a family of big drinkers. When my father went to see his doctor told him that my father needed to limit his drinking to 2 ounces a day, and my father said, "Hell, Doc, I spill that much." When I told my mother that I was going to stop drinking, she said to me, "You will never have fun anymore." Because she could not imagine how her son could be playful without alcohol. In my family, drinking was the language that we spoke in order to feel connected to one another. It was how we said, "You belong, you're part of us." But we as a church, of course, have a different vision, a different calling. Our experience, our calling, our commitment is to experience heaven. We're in the heaven business. As Catherine of Siena said, all the way to heaven is heaven, and all the way to hell is hell. So we cannot swap what the Lord has promised to us for some sort of hazy counterfeit of an alcohol-induced sense of connection. We cannot be afraid that we won't have fun anymore. Now, I'm not trying to get us as an Episcopal Church to go back to prohibition. I'm just trying to remind us of our mission. For a lot of people, drinking is a part of how they're social. There's an aesthetic enjoyment that's part of who we are. It's a gift of creation. And if you don't believe me, there's a reason that Jesus transforms all that water into wine. That's a good thing. As long as we remember, drinking will not bring us to heaven or Pentecost or Holy Communion. And therefore, we as a church need to remember what the limits of alcohol are, and remember that for some of us, alcohol is poison. And therefore, we as a church need to change our perspective about alcohol and addiction, because addiction takes us away from our mission, and addiction keeps us from heaven. That's all thing one, but you're not halfway there. Thing two is too complicated to get there without a poem. So the poem is a poem by just an amazing poet from New Mexico called Naomi Shihab Nye, and it's called Kindness. Before you know what kindness really is, you must lose things. Feel the future dissolve in a moment like salt in a weakened broth. What you held in your hand, what you counted and carefully saved, all this must go. So you can know how desolate the landscape can be between the regions of kindness. How you ride and ride thinking the bus will never stop. The passenger eating maize and chicken will stare out the window forever. Before you learn the tender gravity of kindness, you must travel where the Indian in a white poncho lies dead by the side of the road. You must see how this could be you, how he too was someone who journeyed through the night with plans and the simple breath that kept him alive. Before you know kindness as the deepest thing inside, you must know sorrow as the other deepest thing. You must wake up with sorrow. You must speak to it till your voice catches the thread of all sorrows and you see the size of the cloth. Then it is only kindness that makes sense anymore. Only kindness that ties your shoes and sends you out in the day to mail letters and purchase bread. Only kindness that raises its head from the crowd of the world to say, "It is I you have been looking for," and then goes with you everywhere like a shadow and a friend. Alcoholics talk about ourselves as grateful, recovering alcoholics. And the second part that I want to talk about is what is the gift of that gratitude and what does that have to do with us as a church? So my goal is not simply that we try to get our addictions under control. And certainly it's not just so that we stop certain behaviors so that we as the church don't have problems. The goal is, to quote from St. Paul, is how can we lead a life worthy of the calling to which Christ calls us? And as Paul goes on to describe that process, he says that we are to grow up in every way into the head who is the center, into Christ. Our mission is that growth. Our mission is that growth as individuals and as a body. And we talk about addictions for two reasons. One, because they hinder the whole body. They keep everyone from growing into the likeness of Christ. But two, because those of us in recovery have some good news for the church. Because, to go back to the poem, we have lost things. And we have found things. We have seen the future dissolve like salt in a weakened broth. And we have known sorrow as the other deepest thing inside. So the recovery movement has these gifts to give to the church, and I want to give a hint as what those might be. There are three. One, we know that by losing, we are found. Our weakness is our strength. And when we die, that's when we're raised to new life. The poet W.H. Auden at the beginning of the 20th century called it the age of anxiety, but of course you know we live in a world of terror, and we live in a country where we've actually color-coded how terror is. We live in a world where it's become a norm for black men to be shot in our city streets. We live in a world where mass murders no longer surprise us. We live in a world where we see whole countries dissolve into chaos like Syria, like Venezuela. So is it any wonder that we drink or stick poison in our veins or gamble? The core of my addiction was that I could not believe that I was actually lovable. And I thought that Jack Daniels could drown that voice. Before you can know what kindness really is, you must lose things. None of the miracles in my life have come from any of my strengths or my accomplishments. All of them have come because I have turned to God and said, please, which is the one prayer God always hears. On a spring day in 1990, I got a letter from Bishop George Reynolds telling me I had been, that I was going to be made a postulant for holy orders. I'd been in the process for 2 years. And when I read the letter, this voice came into my head that said, you need to stop drinking because the church doesn't need another drunk priest. But I did not know how to do that. And then the only word that came to me was to say to God, please, help me. We must turn away from the church that has all the answers to the church that speaks to God from our hearts. Please show us the way. What if we as a church embraced our weaknesses? What if we saw them as roads that could lead us back to a closer connection to God? I confess, I cannot read any more books about the new church, the new paradigm, the emergent church. Because newness always starts with a design model or a paradigm or a plan, and I think we have to start with simply saying, help, please. I think our church has an addiction that in order to be important, we have to look a certain way. We have to have a certain number of members. We have to maintain a certain order. But our calling is the mystery of the cross. Christ has died, Christ is risen, Christ will come again. And recovery can give the church courage to let the old self die so that the new self might be reborn. Before you can know what kindness really is, you must lose things. So first, by losing, we are found. 2, you cannot be healed alone. We live together, we die together, but we are always together. There are reasons that recovery programs are always group processes. The first time I went to an AA meeting, I thought, why do I have to listen to all these other people talk about themselves? And why do I care whether they get sober or not? Because the reason I drank was actually a scarcity theology. I was scared there wasn't enough blessing for me, and so instead of opening my hands to ask for the bread of heaven, I drank alone late at night to quiet my fears of being left out. You know, we live together, we die together, we are always together. And the way you keep sober is by paying attention to the well-being of others who are on the same road you are. And I would say the way you grow into holiness is by being connected to God and paying attention to the well-being of all others who cry for help. This is our mission as the church. We're in the together business, the communion enterprise. All of our sacraments require other people. You can't absolve yourself, you can't bless yourself, you can't marry yourself, you can't receive the Eucharist by yourself, you can't baptize yourself, because we're about Holy Communion. The sobriety of the church requires that we pay attention to all the voices who are in pain, who feel lost, who do not know how to get out of hell but want to. Because the truth is, sometimes, as the poem says, we're on the bus, and sometimes we're on the side of the road. The recovery movement is not about any one person. It's a movement just like the Jesus movement. It's about asking God, as we say in the Eucharistic prayer, to move us from error to truth, from sin to righteousness, from death to life. By losing, we are found. You can't heal alone. And finally, the only moment we have is this moment to be alive. Like you, I know today is Saturday and something is happening on Tuesday. And one person will be elected as the next president, and at least 3 other people won't. And some of you will be very happy, and some of you will be in despair. But here's the gift the recovery movement can give us: one day at a time. This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice in it and be glad. Remember the words, the last 2 words of that line. We can only be alive when we are in it. Alcoholism, alcoholics, drug addicts, sex addicts, compulsive gamblers, shoppers, all addicts have this common trait. It's hard to be in the present moment. We want an alternative reality. We want a different story. We are all believers of the scarcity, and yet we are called to believe in the sanctity of the incarnation, which can be a gift to our nation, because underneath all this political rhetoric is a fear both on the left and on the right. As a nation, I believe we are scared to death. So I think today is like Holy Saturday. It's a time when we are in the stillness, waiting to see what God has in mind. And because it's scary, it's tempting for us to try to get out of that moment, to try to do something, to run in circles, scream and shout. We want some distraction. We want some addiction. We want some way to allay our fears. But we as a church, of course, are called to have a very different response. We are to be like Mary Magdalene, to go to the garden and to stand in the gap, to wait in the calm of sobriety and trust in the goodness of the Lord, recognizing that as long as we vote, tell me, please, all of you have voted. You have early voting here? Please, all of you have voted. If not, please, 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 after you leave today, go vote. All we have is our faith. All we have is God's promise. All will be well, and all manner of things will be well. All we have is the love of the Lord, which is in our hearts. But because we have that, we know that there will be resurrection. That is our faith. That is who we are. Not because of us, but because God's love is stronger than death. And this is a gift that not only the recovery movement can give to the church, but the church must give to our nation. So, my brothers and sisters, May you have courage to confront your complicity in a church-wide culture of alcohol. But may you embrace the gifts that the recovery movement can give you and our church. Losing is finding. We are always together, and the only moment we have to be alive is right now. Then it is only kindness that makes sense anymore, only kindness that raises its head from the crowd of the world to say, "It is I you have been looking for," and then goes with you everywhere like a shadow or a friend. God bless you.